It's been well documented that violent games don't necessarily breed violent people. But one question still remains. What exactly is the appeal of fighting in our anime and games? Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here. When I was a kid with my first major game system, the Sega Genesis, my dad once asked me a question that I still get asked to this day. Why do you enjoy playing violent video games? Where's the fun in it? Granted, the most violent game we had back then was a Power Rangers fighting game, but that didn't make the question any easier to answer. Back then, all I could say was, because it's cool. But upon revisiting this question, I find there's a lot more to be said. Why even have this conversation, though? It's very interesting to consider why it is that we as a culture, particularly in popular media, find warriors, soldiers, samurai, assassins, and fighters to be awesome and enviable. Why do children want toy lightsabers or swords to battle each other or imaginary dragons? Why are some of our most cherished fantasies about heroes demonstrating bravery against vicious foes? Where's the appeal when violence is inherently a process of one party harming another? When did that become a thing? Well, to be honest, it's always been a thing. Mankind had been familiar with warfare far before we entertained ourselves with televisions. Our civilizations are founded upon hunting for food and fighting for territory. Armies are nurtured in the fires of heroism and patriotic dedication. For the longest time, a soldier brandishing a blade or firearm has been associated with skill, discipline, bravery, and honor. In fact, this more recent wave of pacifism is relatively new. When it comes to video games in particular, developers aimed to introduce more drama and motivation into their games beyond basic simulations like Pong. Back then, games were still very simple. The hardware didn't allow for much, so the most straightforward conflicts, such as survival and the battle between good and evil, or us versus them, became the go-to foundation most early narrative games were built upon. Since then, these foundations have proven to be appealing for a number of reasons, none of them fully explaining the phenomena on their own. To begin with, the violence seen in anime and video games, as it pertains to this channel, is not all equal. I think there's a huge difference between violence in games like Street Fighter, Resident Evil, Ninja Gaiden, the Tale series, and say, Corpse Party. Some of these games take their violence seriously with a flavor of realism, while others more or less use it for its aesthetic value, or good versus evil drama. Regardless, I'd say a child's exposure to animated violence is formed around at least two main concepts. The first idea is that animated violence is often more than just murder and cruelty. There's a beauty to fighting, at least when it comes to technique and training. We have the martial arts to thank for this. Awesome fight scenes in movies are gloriously choreographed to be exciting and engaging. Sword fights in particular are practically dance performances in their own right. We take skill into account and admire trained warriors who can wow us with their lightning-fast movements and hawk-like precision. We as viewers or gamers want to possess that skill and take control of it, to embody the respect and pride of the warrior. Look at most anime games and notice there's no blood. Rending flesh isn't the point. The point is to perform flashy chain attacks to defeat your enemies. Terms like combos and juggling are indications that the violence in a given game is more of an exercise, a game, rather than a simulation. This leads to the next concept. If the fighting is aesthetic, then why not just make it dancing? Why does it have to be a fight? Well, as I said before, when it comes to entertainment, humans crave drama, and it's known in practice that conflict is what gives rise to drama. Of course, one of the most common conflicts we face is good versus evil, a struggle that has existed since humans first formed moral values. This mentality provides grounds for moral benevolence, as well as an opportunity to enforce that benevolence by combating evil. It's a frame of mind that categorizes certain people and challenges as enemies. This setup means that even outside the realm of physical violence, we all have our own battles, our own enemies, even if only in a figurative sense. A good versus evil dichotomy also serves as a motivation for fighting. What do you do when someone is a threat to you and your loved ones? You defeat them. Suddenly, we begin to seek out good guys and bad guys in every narrative we face. Problem is, you can't always do that IRL. In fact, beyond self-defense or preventing crime, there's really no justifiable reason to enact violence, to look at someone else as purely evil or completely expendable. It's a frustrating reality, but one upon which we've built societies where we can at least pretend to feel safe out in public. Media, on the other hand, provides us an outlet for these frustrations, giving us a space where we can see these things as black and white. The enemies are presented as straw man villains, or virtual punching bags. We, the audience, can place into those characters our problems, our stress, our fears, and defeat them outright. We may not have literal goblins, dragons, or demons to slay, but we certainly have our own monsters to deal with in a conceptual sense. But what of the more graphic examples? Why make them so darn visceral? I've spoken to people important to me, non-gamers, who are concerned that violent games desensitize people and make what should be seen as horrible feel normalized. It's a respectable concern. I was in 4th grade when the Columbine attack happened, and that became the worst school assault for the longest time. In more recent years, though, kids growing up are actually being drilled on how to deal with such attacks, and schools are employing security guards. The more times these attacks occur, the more used to them we become, and the more tangible it becomes for potential attackers to resort to, losing track of the fact that every attack is just as horrific as those that came before. It's not as simple as just counting the casualties. Yet, there's a difference between this kind of violence and that of fictional media. For one, we choose the shows we watch and the games we play. It's not a matter of the world around you becoming more violent beyond your control. It's that you actively decided to expose yourself to a fictional version of violence. This is cathartic. We can vicariously deal with our fears, our curiosities, and lack of control through the characters on screen. Such is the case for the horror genre, which provides us a safe, controlled environment through which to process various threats and nightmares. This allows many of us to confront these fears, normalizing violence in a good way, much like a doctor or surgeon can't save lives if the mere sight of a corpse incapacitates them. The truth is, real-world violence predates any fictional flourishes we can come up with, and the reality is still always more horrific than fiction can ever recreate. Rather than living in fear of man's cruelty, remaining in blissful ignorance until trauma finds its way into our lives, violent media has the potential to help us cope and prepare ourselves. For some, remaining sheltered is much worse. It really depends on the person. Essentially, moral guardians often mistake fictional media as sadistic power fantasies, an avenue for the depraved to fuel their madness by practicing violence in preparation for the real thing. Sadly, this sometimes is the case, but more often than not, these works actually empower audiences to remain calm in the face of horror, to process their existing traumas, and to generally claim control over an otherwise harsh world that, in itself, is far more frightening than our fantasies ever could be. Artistically, this empowerment can be explored through grim realism, or embellished dramatic spectacle. So, can I finally answer why I think violent games and anime are cool? Well, for me, it's all about that control. The real world is unpredictable and completely unfair, but fiction provides me a tangible path to success, and the chance to at least pretend like I'm defeating my problems. This builds confidence, making it easier for me to face those problems in reality without fear, all the while appreciating animated combat as a beautiful work of art. Thus, I would like next to hear from you. Tell me your experiences with violent games. Do you enjoy them? If so, why? Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and, most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of my anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content. If you want to support me directly, there are now 3 ways that all provide the same benefits. You can click join here on YouTube, or join Patreon or Subscribestar for access to exclusive vids and early access. As always, celebrate your fandom.